There's a time when even the best relationships have to come to an end, and I'm selling the DesertX. I'm not selling it because I don't like the DesertX. I'm selling it because I need room in my garage to bring in a new bike so I can do some new testing. So this video is really about those modifications I did and the lessons I learned about the DesertX between then and now. I'm going to give Ducati the distinction of making one of the most stupid upgrades of any of the current generation adventure bikes. They took a bike that had really decent distance, allowed us to spend a very premium amount to add an auxiliary tank, which works really well. And where I live out in the desert is fantastic, because if I don't have the auxiliary tank, I've got to carry spare fuel with me. But the reason I give Ducati the distinction of just making a stupid move is because they made this a magnificent bike with fantastic range, and then they took away the ability to put pannier racks on it. You can barely carry any kind of luggage on the back except for a duffel bag. That's ridiculous. Let's turn it into a really nice touring bike and then take away all the luggage. It might be a little unnerving the first time you get full compression on the suspension, and this little protective flap extends down past this guide and then catches the knobs on the tire, making a brrrp sound that sounds like a set of playing cards and a set of spokes. It's nothing that's going to hurt anything, but if you aren't expecting it, you might wonder what the heck is rubbing, what's making that noise, and it's just this plastic guard here. I did try to heat this up and roll it back, but other than trimming it to not hit the knobs, which would then expose the rear shock to debris, I went ahead and just learned to live with the sound. I've got several things to cover here. One, let's talk about the heat on the motorcycle. Yes, this motorcycle has 110 horsepower and it puts heat out. It ends up on the back of your calves. If I'm standing off-road, if I'm in full gear, generally speaking, it's not something I'm going to notice or care much about. But when things slowed down, and if I was sitting, I definitely felt that heat. I did remove the catalytic converter at one point and do a decat on it. I did not find any noticeable change in heat, so the catalytic went back on. There's no reason to pollute the environment and make more noise if it's not going to give me a benefit. So I am back to stock. Also, with that modification, pulling the cat, I've heard a lot of people say you don't need to remap the bike if you decat it. I'm going to disagree with that. I definitely noticed a delay off idle when I pulled that cat off. So unless you're going to go through the whole process of mapping and doing it right, I would just say leave it stock, leave it quiet, and go from there. The brake or the rear brake lever on this does have a propensity to get caught on the ground when you hit. I've had this bend a few times when I hit the ground, and I've been able to bend that rod back. I have not had a failure of it. I stayed with Outback Motortech, and I did that for the crash bars, for the skid plate, and for the luggage rack. All of those perform like most of their products on this bike. They did a good job. They did what they're supposed to do. Most importantly, on the DesertX, the side stand is mounted to the motor on the back side, which means that if you strike that stop, that side stand stop, onto a hard boulder, then you run the chance of actually cracking the engine casing, and obviously that's a big deal. So having a skid plate that protects that is essential if you're going to take one of these off-road and do silly, crazy things with it. Let's be honest, when Ducati designed the Testeretta motor that's being used in the DesertX, it was not low-speed technical riding that they had in mind. This motor was built to go, and it likes to use RPMs, which means I usually ran about 1,000 RPM higher than I would on other bikes like the Tenere 700 or the 1200 GS, which are both engines that don't mind if they lug around. But if you do that, if you run those lower RPMs, what you're going to notice is a lot of slap coming off the back end, a click, click, click sound. And what that is just the pulses of the motor and the slack in the drivetrain. All you need to do at that point is downshift, run slightly higher RPM than you might already be accustomed to. It'll take all of that slack out. You won't have any chain noise anymore. It's just the fact that it's not a lugging motor. This bike was built to go, and that's when it's the happiest, is when it's going, not putting. My top complaint, other than the additional fuel tank and losing luggage space, has to do with the ABS system on the Ducati. It works fantastic in road environments, paved roads, gravel roads, dirt roads, no problems. However, if you're one of those few people who want to take this onto very technical riding situations, you might find that the ABS is kicking in way too early. In fact, even on the pavement, if I'm doing really tight U-turns with the bike rolled over and I'm picking up that rear brake during the U-turn, I found the ABS would kick in very early. Also, when I was going off-road down a particular hill covered in boulders and rocks, a long steep downgrade, that off-road ABS kicked in and I started feeling like I was free rolling down, and I haven't had more of a thrill ride than that in a long time. So I realized that that quick trigger that's up on the left hand grip where you can just pull that trigger and shut your ABS off 100% became very useful in those very technical, challenging situations. Now, in Ducati's defense, it is very easy to shut that ABS off. I didn't have to go through a bunch of menus. I didn't have to do anything crazy. All I had to do was grab that trigger, hold it until it was turned off, and then it was left off. And that goes in concert with the fact that once you get to pre-program all of your different modes, that it stays in that mode when you turn the key on and off, making it a very customizable and very user-friendly platform. If I had to rate any manufacturer on the warranty process, right now I'd put Ducati number one. Their experience dealing with both the factory and the dealerships were top notch as far as getting warranty claim done, and the coverage that they offer compared to other manufacturers for an adventure bike and going in the dirt and off-road is absolutely number one, top notch. I did have to do a couple of warranty claims. One was the extended fuel tank, which wasn't doing a full transfer of fuel from the back tank to the main tank. I brought it in, they recalibrated the tanks, problem solved. I did have a fork seal failure. It was early on in the warranty, so it was covered, and it was not related to any kind of a fork damage. It was not in dirt. It was not after jumping. I wasn't doing anything silly that would cause that. I think it was just, luck. That's why warranties exist. Late in 2023, this is a 2023 model, Ducati did start selling a fork protector that mounted up onto the fender that helped extend the coverage of that lower fork and the seal itself. In my original review of this motorcycle, I didn't think this was an issue. I still don't. Because once the bike's in motion and those forks are compressed, it spends most of its time back behind this fender. And given the angle and the way things deflect, I think it would be very, very difficult to truly get any kind of damage up onto that fork seal. But Ducati did address that early on, so that's really a non-issue if you're looking at these bikes now. The one thing that was more of a pattern claim that I've been watching other owners deal with is front brake rotor warpage and or the rear brake rotor. I did have some very light warpage on the rotor. It was so small, in fact, that I wasn't positive that Ducati was going to warranty the rotors, but in fact they warranted both rotors and the pads. No questions asked, and they did it quickly and efficiently. So big thumbs up for Ducati on the warranty, and frankly, post-purchase care and warranty is a big deal for me when you're buying a bike this expensive and this nice. Most of my rider preference changes or upgrades happened here at the front of the bike. I started off by just doing a windshield modification. The factory windshield wasn't horrible. I did some road touring with it. I did some off-road. I thought it was okay, but always looking for something a little better. I did pick up a unit garage shield, which was a little wider, slightly taller, and then had a decompression vent in it. It was not better than factory. My experience with that was that I actually preferred the OEM shield over that unit garage. Although the unit garage looked amazing, it didn't actually add any better airflow for me. My final solution was taking the factory OEM shield and then trimming it down to make it a little shorter, and then doing an offset mount of my gauges so I could still put my phone up on front of the bike since I could no longer mount it on the top. Now that did change. If you're going to do this setup, make sure that your bark busters or hand guards, whatever you have, still clear that center gauge or your main gauge cluster here. That's going to be a big deal. The other modification up here is I went to the double take mirrors. I think these are a wonderful product, but I didn't do it because of the airflow that a lot of people think the turbulence comes from the mirrors. And it wasn't because about the factory mirrors breaking. For me, it was just, it made it easy to move the mirrors out of my way when I'm riding off-road. I prefer having them down out of my way, or to use that ball mount for camera mounting. And that was really nice. Before I start talking about this modification, let me make it clear. It's not a sponsorship. I'm not getting paid. I don't get kickbacks. I don't get free product. I just think it's really this cool. That's the Wildatheart levers out of South Africa. They're silly expensive, but of everything I did to this bike, I honestly believe that changing the levers made the bike feel more mine and more controllable than anything else I did to it. I absolutely love these levers. I recommend them. And if you can afford a bike like this, you can afford to do a modification like this. Super cool. Definitely an all-time favorite of mine. Here's a brand I've never used before, and that's the Vinesh Motorsports foot pegs. I was over in Georgia doing some training in the red clay that we get out there, and I was using the X Powers, and they really didn't have a lot of grip. The factory foot pegs on the Ducati DesertX are really good. I like them. They're just about the right size. They clean out well, but unfortunately these teeth just weren't sharp enough to hold on to those boots, and that's when I ordered up the Vinesh. They solved the problem. Even in that slimy packing clay, with boots that had virtually no traction on them whatsoever, these did keep me in contact with the bike. It's a brand I've never used before. I will definitely be looking up the Vinesh foot pegs again in the future for whatever bike I decide to replace the DesertX with. So to summarize the bike in general, this bike likes to go fast, and it likes to go fast in nice open trails. True to its name, the DesertX, that's the place where I rode it, where this bike was the most fun. It will do technical riding. It has great manners, but definitely it is happiest when that throttle is rolling and the RPMs are up. As far as the kind of a summary of notes, my two I would say favorite modifications are, number one, the free one of just trimming down the factory shield to give it better airflow. Number two would be the Wildatheart levers that I picked up out of South Africa. They really changed the character of the bike, believe it or not. The most critical modification on this bike is definitely the skid plate. Given the amount of hits and damage I have on this skid plate, I would have been very uncomfortable and very likely could have caused some severe damage without it. Wonderful bike. I'm going to miss it, but if I don't make space in the garage, I won't have any new bikes to ride, and I won't have anything to make videos about. Thank you for watching the channel, and thank you all of you on Patreon who keep this channel alive through your support. And of course, most importantly, just remember, always smile while you ride, because attitude matters.